I'll get us started, Lynn. Thank you so
Okay.
much. And thank you for everybody for joining and joining today and for having me here. So the entire UX Summit is absolutely terrific. But this is the one talk that has me incredibly excited and pumped through an incredible slate of talks. Um, I think it shouldn't be a controversial thing to say that law and our legal systems could really benefit from design and bringing a design-minded approach to bear. But as much as it may seem fundamental to those of us here at this summit, the fact is law has not deeply embraced design. It's probably one of the final major professions and really institutions of society that has not brought that perspective of design deeply into the core of what they do. And that's a real shame because we in the legal world are committed to and we're investing a ton of energy into improving access to justice. I work at the Department of Justice. I'm senior counsel for legal innovation there, and in the Civil Rights Division. And I can say, I mean, this is something that not just speaking for Department of Justice, really speaking for all lawyers. It's something that lawyers do care very deeply about. But we're spending a very large amount of that energy focused on a fairly singular solution, which is how can we get more people, more lawyers? And I see that as trying to figure out how do we get more guides, translators, and navigators for a seemingly irreducibly complex system. Design, I think, offers another path because design doesn't start from an assumed solution, but it instead focuses on the problem and keeps every possible solution on the table until we arrive at one in that sweet spot of viability, feasibility, and of course, and most importantly, desirability. Now, why is it that law has been so slow to embrace a design-minded approach? An approach that really tries to make complex systems more simple and intimidating experiences more approachable? There are a lot of reasons. Some are good, some are not so good. But if you add it all up, the bottom line is, and this is the most important point I'm going to make today, making this happen in law is very, very, very difficult. That is why I get really, really excited when I see someone who actually takes a problem in law, approaches it through the lens of design, and then creates actual qualitative and quantitative improvements to how people are engaging with legal systems and structures. To put it mildly, if you can do it in law, you can do it anywhere. And today we're going to hear from someone who did just that, Crystal Sprage. Crystal's success drives home that there is hope here. And I, for one, I'm going to be taking a lot of notes because I want to know how she pulled it off, because those are insights that are things that I think all of us can really learn from. So I'm very, very proud to introduce Crystal and take it away.
And Daniel, certainly no pressure here to say that at the end of the day, this is the one you've been waiting on. Thank you very much for that wonderful introduction. And I saw someone put in the chat a comment to say, speak it, Daniel, tell people about what's going on in the legal system. And I can't agree more. Our presentation today will take a very simple action that really changed our municipal court and improved our access to justice for all of our citizens that interact with our municipal court. But it is just one simple action, and I hope that you enjoy hearing about it today. I want to thank Gabby, Alex, Jean, Caroline, and Lynn for being here today and making sure that we can have this conversation. And thank you for taking the time to listen and show interest in improving justice systems. But hopefully you'll find things in today's presentation that aren't just applicable to the justice system. I might agree with Daniel that if you can do it with judges and attorneys, then you can do it anywhere. And I think that that is absolutely the fact. So I'm going to share my screen real quick and we'll get going with our presentation. All right, Daniel, if you'll give me a thumbs up if you see that presentation and we'll get rolling. Fantastic. Well, thank you again for everybody joining today. I know that it's a long middle of the week day, but this is an exciting topic for me to talk about journey mapping and the access to justice that journey mapping produced for our court. I want to encourage anyone that is listening today to share this information about journey mapping and try it, just try it. Because it really does give a new dimension to service delivery in my perspective from a court system, but from anybody that works in public service and works with the public directly. I'm going to give a disclaimer. I'm not a technologist. I'm a court administrator, and court administrators are just like any other administrator. We want to make the system work. We want it to work better, and we want it to work for our staff and our citizens. So regardless of whether or not you are an administrator of a court like me, or you are an administrator in a state agency like the Motor Vehicle Department, or a federal agency like the Department of Veterans Affairs, you're providing care to your community and looking at a process improvement from a design perspective, as Daniel says, or from a journey mapping perspective, is the embodiment of the thing we all attempt to do, which is to be good servant leaders. So on our second slide here, I just want to give a little bit of an introduction of myself so you know what my perspective is that I come to the table, and a roadmap of what we're going to be talking about. So as Daniel said, my name is Crystal Sprage. I'm currently a project director for the Unified Government of Wyandotte County, Kansas City, Kansas. And yes, that's a huge name for a municipality, but that is our municipality's name. Previous to that, I was also working in the municipal court as the municipal court administrator, but have spent the majority of my career in corrections of some kind, whether that be at a municipal level or a district or a circuit court level. And that includes innovative programs like drug courts and problem-solving courts, diversionary programs, doing that thing that we all do as administrators, which is try to make the system work better. We are missing a couple of presenters today that you saw on the list of presenters. With recovering as a court from COVID, our judge has been pulled away today. She would have loved to be here and sends her regrets, but we're trying to work through a backload, as every court is across the United States and across the world, really, and trying to get cases adjudicated so that citizens can get that access to justice that we're talking about today. So we're going to walk through this journey map process that the municipal court participated in, illustrating our experience as a municipal court, but also giving some examples of what journey mapping might look like in other areas, and ultimately the unexpected outcome that we reached as a court in improving access to justice through this journey mapping process. And then we'll have a little bit of time at the end, because I think question and answer sessions are always the best. So on our third slide, we're really talking about the graphic, what the graphic is illustrating, which is our road to this journey mapping process and through this journey mapping process. And with the three components that you see here listed on your slideshow, you'll see the three elements that came together to make this journey mapping process happen. First, it was our unified government of Wyandotte County, Kansas City, Kansas. We're the third largest city in Kansas. We're a consolidated city-county government, so that does make us a little unique, not super unique. We've got about 165,000 residents, but we do have a 21% or an over 21% poverty rate in our county. So we have a lot of room for improvement as a community. The second player at the table was the municipal court, and the area that the perspective that I came from. Our municipal court handled and filed traffic and misdemeanor cases from 10 different agencies. We handle about 40,000 charges a year, and we've got about a 55% traffic offense rate versus a 14% misdemeanor rate. And this is important in our journey mapping process, because we're not just looking at one process as we're approaching our path to access to justice. It's probably important to mention also, like Lynn said, our legal system was just as embedded in those local traditions and those local processes or legal processes that make us feel comfortable in the legal system. We had a small budget, maybe $250,000 to run our municipal court, not counting staff. So outside staff, about $250,000 annually. And we were absolutely steeped in those traditions. My first day in the court in 2015, one of the very first items that the clerk showed me how to use was where the rubber stamp was to say dismissed or continued on the back of the ticket. So a little bit of perspective of how we were holding on to those traditions within our court system. And when we did make a change in our municipal court, we oftentimes mirrored what was happening to the left or right of us, instead of really thinking about what was happening in the pews of the citizens that were sitting in front of us. We were oftentimes going to a sister court or a similarly sized court and say, how did you, administrator, handle this issue that we're trying to solve for? And then we would replicate it without really asking anybody else at the table how they would see that system interact differently with citizens. We also had a very low case turnover rate. And for those of you who are familiar with court systems, once you file more cases and dismiss less cases, you run yourself into a problem very quickly. And although we were filing about 40,000 cases a year, our open cases at the time that we participated in the journey mapping process exceeded 190,000. So if that gives you a little indication of how those wheels of justice move so slowly for us in our municipal court. And then the third party at the table was Open Cities. And Open Cities was a vendor that the unified government partnered with to provide website re-enhancements and forms and access to digital services to our entire government, not just the court, but they really focus on helping governments of all sizes deliver really good websites that are interactive and citizen-based and service-based. So on our fourth slide, give you a little bit of background in how we launched into our digital services journey mapping process. And again, we see the graphic of the road to indicate how we are moving toward an enhanced digital service environment for our citizens. But our unified government path started with a digital services pilot back in 2019. We were like any other government. We wanted to have the best service that we could offer, and we had a genuine desire to make improvements. And so we partnered with Open Cities to take on this change to our digital front door. But again, like most local governments, we were hesitant to jump in with both feet and change too much too fast. So we wanted to do a test case scenario with Open Cities and maybe start with some digital services with early adoption departments. I happen to be in municipal court, one of the departments that was chosen to be an early adopter of our improved digital services. So we started to think about our test cases and how we would come to the table to really think about digital services when we were invited by Open Cities. So Open Cities brings us to the table, and we're going to start an alpha site or an alpha project in which we're encouraged to bring in a service that we offer to our citizens as it is today. And we were under the understanding we were going to go through a mapping process to better understand that service. So as a court administrator, I'm ready to go. I've got about 15 different forms in our court. I think we're going to digitize. I bring with me a couple of different voices. I bring with me my administrative judge and several of my frontline clerk staff, and seasoned and new both. And we wanted to walk into this experience with Open Cities, take our form, solve for a problem, and we were ready to go. But we didn't quite have it completely figured out what we were in for. So we picked up this form and went to the Digital Services Academy with Open Cities, and we said, okay, we've got this form that we want to solve for. Let's move ahead. So on our fifth slide, what I didn't realize at the time, what I realize now is I was taking the same approach that really good administrators take. We had a policy, and in our case, we were looking at a policy to get a continuance, a first continuance in our court. And I had the typical response, which was policy is made, law is enacted, statute is adopted, and I'm going to take that policy, law, or statute, and I'm going to make a form. It's going to be great. I'm going to really dig into how we're going to get this accomplished for the citizen. So on the fifth slide, our interaction here is the road coming across the cityscape with how we typically look at policy first to allow us to drive or give us permission to drive to a solution. And we look at that by saying, okay, citizen, I know exactly how we need to resolve this for you. Let's make it happen. Let's make it on paper. Let's make it in a digital form. But we're going to make this happen for you. And the first thing that you're going to need to do, citizen, is you're actually going to have to apply for this benefit, service, et cetera. In our case in the municipal court, it was you're going to have to apply for this continuance. So we tell citizens you have to pick up an application from the city. You have to come down to the office. You have to print it off your computer. You can only do that in person from 8 to 5, Monday through Friday. So in fact, as an administrator, we're telling the citizen how they're going to resolve their problem. This is what you need to do. And then oftentimes we tell them you're required to do something. You're required to bring documentation with you. You're required to have your ID. You're required to have your proof of residency. So again, as an administrator, I feel like I'm preparing them for the action that they're getting ready to take. In some cases, there's a cost. Sometimes they know what the cost is, but that cost could vary depending on their unique circumstances. But yet again, we say, well, come in and we'll help you. We'll provide customer service and we'll explain it to you. So come on in and bring your documentation and we'll tell you what you need to do and how much you're going to need to pay. Then I'm going to take that form from you or that continuance notice in the case of the court, and I'm going to process it. I'm going to take your form, our staff is going to process it, and we'll get back to you real soon and let you know how that turns out. Whether or not we contact you by mail or email, we'll make sure to contact you, but we're going to put it through some kind of process. And then we're going to take some kind of action internally. We're going to either decline your request, we're going to accept your request, or the worst case scenario, we're going to give you your form back because you didn't fill it out correctly. So in the legal system, if you didn't ask for the continuance in the right way, you didn't fill out the form right, you didn't give us the right case number, we're going to decline it or we're going to turn it back to you and tell you you did it wrong. So oftentimes what we do as administrators is we provide instruction for what the citizen needs to do to meet our process, instead of looking at it as what the citizen needs to do to reach the outcome that they are desiring. Some of my other favorite, and I know generalized statements about how we look at this as administrators, is we like to make forms and we like to really get serious about what we're saying by just making the type bold. We like to say things like, well, if the form doesn't work exactly the way you want it to online, just print it out and fill it out and bring it into us. We tell them what to do instead of what we are hoping that they get accomplished. Oftentimes we'll copy the same form over and over again and hand it out. We'll post it on a website. Sometimes it's fillable, sometimes it's not. And then the legal system is famous for providing very complicated instructions, for saying, well, you need to assume that you know what this Latin word means when we say you're getting a continuance without an attorney. So instead of focusing on policy first and letting the policy drive the process and letting the administrator or the staff or the agency dictate what the citizen should do to accomplish their end goal, what slide 6 does is really flip that on its head and say, how do we drive as the citizen? And how do we think about the citizen experience first and then the process second? So on this slide, you'll see what commonly citizens would go through in any type of system here in a local government, especially, but also in the court system. It's a very tangled road with different twists and turns. For example, our number one stop on that road says, what do I need to do? So the citizen typically doesn't start the process, in our case, by coming to court and saying, I need a continuance for 4 weeks. Typically what the citizen is thinking in our journey mapping process is, I really want to satisfy my ticket, but I don't have the money to do that today, and I'm afraid I'm going to have to pay. So I wonder if they'll give me an extension. So thinking about it in a different way instead of, well, all they have to do is ask for that continuance and we would grant it to them. The citizen or constituent or defendant might also say, well, what do I need to do before I show up for court? Maybe I got a ticket that is a speeding ticket and a no proof of insurance ticket. Man, I wish I would have brought my proof of insurance with me. Maybe the court would have looked at that, but I didn't know I needed to bring it when I got here. Maybe they're also thinking about whether or not they can do that interaction online, and they've spent some time online trying to figure out how to do that interaction. And in today's society, why wouldn't we be able to do some of those interactions online? Oftentimes we say to them as public administrators, why don't you come on back in a week because we need some processing time. And the citizens' experience is much different than that. They didn't expect they would have to come back in a week or 2 weeks or receive notification in the mail. They've taken off work that particular day. They have figured out how to handle their child care. They have figured out how to get to the court so that they can interact with their court appearance that day. And now we're telling them you have to come back. Maybe in circumstances like car tags, for example, there's a question about what do I have to do annually? Do I have to do this often and repeated? There could also be questions around what makes them eligible for a service. So in the municipal court, what makes me eligible for a continuance? And in the end, the citizen wants to know, did they accomplish their goal? So in my experience and our court's experience, our citizens and defendants are coming in looking for three things. They want good service, they want to engage, and they want to make sure that they're in compliance. And if we're looking at it from those perspectives and really understanding what the citizen or defendant is going through, we can make better process decisions rather than implement a process and then figure out how to give better instruction for the citizen to align themselves with our process. So as Open Cities came to us and as an administrator, I happily brought them a couple of forms that we were going to make digital and we were going to be able to launch them on our website. They said, well, wait a minute, we're going to do something before we start making these forms. We're going to do something called journey mapping. And judge and clerks and administrator, we really want you to think about your process for, in our case, granting a continuance. And we want you to think about it holistically from the citizen's point of view. And Open Cities walked us through this journey mapping process in which we all got to think about different interactions we'd had with citizens, different statements that we'd heard from defendants, and think about the process from the citizen's perspective. So on slide 7, I give you a sample of a journey map. There's no right way to do it. There's no wrong way to do it. It can be digital. It can be on sticky notes on a wall in the administrator's office. But the point is to really think about what the situation is when the citizen comes to you to interact. For us, it's citizen gets a ticket and comes into the courtroom. So what's their scenario? What are they trying to do that day? We're trying to process cases, but what is that individual trying to do on that day? What is the process that we go through? So it's important to list the process that we go through. But then what are the experiences of the citizen as they go through that process? What are the pinch points? When do they engage staff? Where are the conflicts? Where are the difficulties? Where are the forms difficult? Where are they filled out incorrectly? Where are the numbers that tell us how many continuances in our case we are giving each and every day versus how many continuances we're not? And where are the areas of opportunity? So this illustration or example gives that scenario, the expected journey that we think that the citizen is going to take, and then the journey that they actually take. And what are some free flowing, free thinking ideas as we went through that journey mapping process? So slide 8 gives you another example of that journey mapping process. Again, there's no right way or wrong way. Whatever you're comfortable with as an administrator, staff, or director, or in our case, also a judge. Slide 8 gives us an example of a process listing, trying to get application for a housing waiting list. And then the center section is what the customer is experiencing throughout that process. So when we're putting in the application for a housing waiting list, most times citizens are excited. We're happy. We're going to get a permanent place to live. But very quickly, when we hand them the application and it has a list of information that we need to the administrator, we're asking for the information that we need to make this process happen. But what is the citizen feeling during that process? Oftentimes, they've given the same information 2 or 3 times just to get to this point, and here we're asking for it again. So in this example, an opportunity might be to engage our technologists to think about how we can get that information from one entry point into the next entry point so that the citizen can have a more fluid experience. Other things to think about as you're doing journey mapping is to engage those unusual voices and to engage them often. I've said a couple of times during our presentation that oftentimes we look internally at our process and we watch that piece of paper flow from internal staff person to internal staff person. And the pieces that we're missing are pretty striking when you come at it from a journey mapping perspective. So on slide 9, we want to illustrate that we want to engage those unusual voices often and early. So some of those unusual voices are certainly your employees at all different levels. For me, that those frontline staff understood the citizen's journey better than I did, certainly as an administrator, and they had a good understanding or perspective about where the pain points were, where the application for continuance was not getting filled out correctly, or where the issue was in the courtroom. We might also want to look at students. We were lucky enough to have a couple of legal students come sit in on our journey mapping process, and they definitely brought a fresh set of eyes to a system that doesn't get fresh set of eyes very often. And those perspectives were really valuable. They asked questions that were difficult for us to answer and ultimately got us to the policy change that we ended up at. And then those technologists are so important because they can make impossible things happen. So if as an employee and a student and a citizen, you're thinking about, hey, it would really be great if we could get that information from this form to that form without having the citizen fill it out or write it out again. Sometimes technologists can make that happen for us. So it's important that we engage those folks with logic and learning and really seeing what they can make happen. But first and foremost, we have to engage the people that we are serving and ask them about their experience. So it is not often that a judge and a court administrator go into the community and say, how was that experience for you when you had to ask for that continuance? What were you thinking as you were going through that process? Also listen to the complaints that you get from your citizens. Oftentimes we're responding to the complaint to fix the complaint. But an accumulation of those complaints are actually a request. They're a request to make your process better and more accessible. So if we're having trouble filling out a request for continuance in a motion format, and that happens over and over again, that's really a request to look at that motion for continuance a second and third time to see if it's accessible for your citizens. So really engaging those citizens and asking them how their experience has been with whatever service or application that they are engaging with. Again, there's no right way or wrong way. I found since being engaged with journey mapping that we've done it in several different ways, always resulting in positive change and a better articulation of proof of those changes, not only through the citizen interaction, but also through the statistics that we looked at within the court system. We oftentimes will post this journey map in a live place where folks can add to it or revise it or change it over a period of time because it's not something that you can come up with in a singular event. Oftentimes we've had citizens draw out their experience for us. You know, give them a piece of paper and say, draw out what you did in a map format from point A to point B, and then walk through it yourself. Walk through that process or have someone that's a little less familiar with your process walk through that process. No one group has the entire picture of what the citizen experiences and how you can enact better insights into or better actions into your processes. It takes all of those unusual voices. So how did that end up with us? So speaking specifically about the court experience on slide 10, we're talking about how that curvy, twisty road got straight for us and got straight for our citizens. So I've alluded to what we brought to the journey mapping process with Open Cities a couple of different times, but let me elaborate on it here a little bit. Our problem that we were solving for when we walked into the room to do a journey mapping process with Open Cities was that we thought defense attorneys were clogging up our courtrooms. We had observed that every Monday, every Tuesday, and every Wednesday morning and afternoon, Citizens would report for court at 8 o'clock. They would sit in the pews 50, 60, 70 deep. And then the attorneys would come in for those who had been able to retain attorneys for simple traffic tickets all the way through misdemeanor tickets. And the attorneys would come into the courtroom and they would request a first-time continuance on their cases. And we 100% of the time would give those attorneys that continuance, that their defendant did not have to appear because an attorney appeared for them. And this was taking an hour in our courtroom twice a day in 2 courtrooms. Meanwhile, our citizens were sitting in the back of the courtroom and they were waiting. They had taken off time from work. They had figured out how to get their kids to school, or they had had to bring their kids with them. They had figured out public transportation, and they are sitting as attorneys would walk in, get their continuance, get signed off, get them out. And we were very efficient at moving those attorneys in and out of the courtroom. It just would take some time on traffic days, especially. So we came to the table and said, you know what? We need these attorneys to be able to do this continuance request online. So they can enter their appearance, they can request that first continuance, we can schedule them later, and we can keep them out of the courtroom so that those citizens can get to the bench first. We'd also looked at switching the order of the individuals in the courtroom, but found that the judge's preference, because that's the way it had always been, was to see those attorneys first and get them in and out because it was an easier exchange. So we start this journey mapping process by saying, okay, this is what we want to solve for. We want to do a digital form that allows attorneys to do their entry of appearance online, and we want to be able to grant them a first-time continuance. So our process was pretty clear. Entry of an appearance, request for continuance, always granted, easy form, easy interaction. Let's make that happen. But as we were having this conversation with legal students to our left and our staff to our right, and our judge genuinely wanting to do the right thing and get the citizens in and out of the courtroom as quickly as she possibly could, we realized we were solving for the wrong thing. So our policy at the time was that first-time continuances were given in person. You had to show up. You had to show up and say, I need a continuance to the judge and ask for that continuance. And you were granted a 4-week continuance or a 6-week continuance. And you came back to court to deal with whatever the issue was that you had to deal with. But if you had an attorney and you could pay for an attorney on a traffic ticket or a seatbelt ticket, you didn't have to show up. Your attorney could show up, stand in line for 20 minutes, get a continuance, and you could move on down the road. And it wasn't until we went through that analysis of not the process, but the experience of what the citizen was feeling, sitting 3 or 4 rows back in the courtroom, that one of my brand new clerks said, well, that's not really fair. Why do those attorneys get to get a continuance online, but Joe Smith, who's sitting 2 deep, who has a traffic ticket, he doesn't get to do that online. He has to take off work and come in. And I think that was the moment that we realized that the journey mapping process, looking at it from the citizen perspective, would change the outcome of what our journey mapping process would be. So we quickly pivoted and we said, hey, why does the attorney get a guaranteed first-time continuance without the client present? And now we are going to make that digitized, but we wouldn't give that to citizens. What complicated matters is if this defendant, the citizen, did not appear, within 48 hours, the judge would issue a warrant for their arrest, which caused them to post a bond. If they appeared by policy at that time prior to their first court appearance, and in good faith showed up and said, I have a funeral, doctor's appointment, I'm going to be out of town for business on my court date, I need to get a continuance to a week later, we would actually ask them to post a cash bond to ensure that they would show up on that other court date. So not only did we realize through the journey mapping process that we needed to make this access, simple access to a first-time continuance on a municipal court case, equal to everyone, but we needed to rethink how we were requesting bond when citizens were asking in advance to prepare the court for the fact that they had a conflict in their schedule. That we needed to think about that process in a different way. So here are the opportunities that we brought to the table. Attorneys should be able, right? They should be able to request their first time continuance digitally. We should offer that as a service. So we don't want to lose that. But defendants who can't afford counsel or choose not to get counsel, they should also get treated equally. Everyone should have the same access to that justice system. So later that evening, after going through this mapping process, the judge and I were having a conversation about our policy. And all of a sudden, it became crystal clear that we needed to change our policy and digitize a service all at the same time. So within 48 hours, we were able to change the policy to allow everyone to get a guaranteed first time continuance and everyone to get that access digitally. And we launched our form within 48 hours. So it really brought home the power of that journey mapping process and how working that problem from the client perspective or the citizen perspective could affect a policy change that had not been able to be changed in at least 10 years. And it made that policy change so clear and easy that we were able to do it in 48 hours.